Hello. Some of you may believe that, like I once did, that the elusive perfect IBDP score of 45 is the ultimate goal, one worth every sacrifice. And for those who aren't familiar, the IPDP is a 2-year academic program for high schoolers that's widely seen as being very rigorous, intensive, and demanding, so that getting that 45 is viewed as extremely difficult. I have somehow gotten the 45, not because I'm an alien, more because I was an exemplar for what overworking looks like. I was so determined to get it, I sacrificed an immense amount. And some of you may think I'm here to encourage you to do the same, but that's actually quite the opposite of this talk's goal. Now, to preface, pursuing a 45 did benefit me, and I think anyone can get it if they invest massive amounts of time and effort. However, I've already discussed how one can get a 45 in a school article, so I'll do something different now by questioning if one should even invest that much time and effort, because I think it's under-discussed. Now, my aim here isn't to really discourage everyone from pursuing a 45, but to help current and future IBDP students make informed decisions about their aims by making sure they know what pursuing that top grade really entails. And this will likely be applicable to the pursuit of perfect grades in other curricula. Now, I'll explain this partly using economics because it's concerned with how we deal with scarcity, and personal time and effort are both very much scarce resources. And the overall point I'll be arguing is that pursuing a 45 demands sacrificing time and effort that could be better spent elsewhere. So first, let's go through the law of diminishing returns in economics. But before that, some terminologies. So factors of production are the inputs and resources used in a goods production. For example, to make woku chicken, the factors might include the ingredients, the pots, the stoves, and the labor, like the cooks. Now, the variable factors are the factors you can add more of in the short run, like buy more ingredients and hire more cooks to make more portions. The fixed factors are the ones you can't currently add more of in the short run, like the stoves, because maybe they're expensive, or the pots, because not enough space in the stoves. Although in the long run, all factors will eventually be variable. Now, the law of diminishing returns describes what happens if you continuously allocate additional units of a variable factor, like workers, towards the goods production, while all other factors, like machines, are fixed. So initially, allocating additional workers results in progressively larger returns. For example, in a factory starting with 1 worker, adding another worker might increase output by 2, another by 3. However, after allocating the optimal number of workers, each additional worker results in diminishing and progressively smaller returns. For example, if that optimal number is 5, then adding the 5th worker might increase output by 5, but adding another might only increase it by 4, and another by 3, until eventually you get negative returns on output. Now, this phenomenon isn't a strict scientific law, but it has been observed many times by economists, and there are different possible causes for each case. For example, for a factory, if the machine you're using can't physically produce more than X units per minute, then adding more workers won't let you exceed that. And furthermore, the workers might start getting in each other's way, hindering productivity. Now, this also applies to our pursuit of grades, where the variable factors are the time and effort invested, the output is the grades, although you can also consider the benefits from studying, and the fixed factor is the number of bodies we have to perform that effort during that time, which is always 1. Now, the cause of diminishing returns in this case is twofold. So first, our body, including our brain, gets progressively more exhausted the longer and harder you exert it without rest. And second, the longer you do the same activity without any variety to avoid tedium, the more you get tired and bored of it. Now, there's 2 things we can hence infer. First, increasing the time and effort allocated to working and studying will increase exhaustion, boredom, and the risk of burnout, leading to diminishing returns, because you'll study and work slower, and what you learn won't really stick. Second, since during the diminishing returns phase, increasing output by an additional unit requires increasingly more input, then increasing your grade in a subject from a 6 to a 7, which is the highest grade per subject in the IBDP, will require more time and effort just by virtue of diminishing returns than going from, say, a 1 to a 2. Now, related to that second point is how the marking criteria for IDP assessments is structured such that getting higher marks is usually progressively more difficult. For example, for internal assessments, or IAs, which are mandatory assignments. For example, here's the physics IA. Increasing your mark for this evaluation criteria from a 0 to a 1 is easy. It just needs superficial responses. But going from a 5 to a 6 is likely the most difficult, requiring meticulous polishing to convince markers you deserve the highest marks. And crucially, at some point, the personal benefits you get will also experience diminishing returns, not just because of exhaustion, but also because you'll be focusing more on meticulous editing instead of actual research or analysis or writing as you progress towards the higher marks. I realized this when I reached a point where I started spending a literal hour every time I had to decide whether I should delete like 2 or 3 specific sentences, because that was really draining. It made me start questioning my life decisions, and it definitely didn't help me learn much. And it's quite similar for external assessments, which are our final exams, although for time studying and practicing instead of working. So to reiterate, the higher the mark, the more progressively difficult it is to achieve, and the less additional personal benefits you get. And remember, getting a 45 requires that your work for all subjects fall into the higher mark bands. Now, diminishing returns can usually be surmounted by increasing the other factors of production. For example, more machines to operate. Unfortunately, in this case, we can't increase the number of bodies we have to overcome exhaustion or boredom. And furthermore, we can't increase our variable factors endlessly, especially for time, since we only have 24 hours available a day, and you can never increase that. So any additional time allocated to studying and working always comes at the cost of time you could have allocated to other important things. And this leads us to opportunity costs, the idea in economics that before committing resources towards any endeavor, we should consider its costs in terms of the sacrificed benefits of the next best alternative we could have allocated those resources to instead. Now, importantly, when analyzing this, you have to be open-minded and consider all types of possible benefits from the alternative endeavors, like personal, academic, physical, mental, and societal. For example, if you want to spend 1 more hour studying, consider spending that hour on enjoyable extracurriculars instead could yield personal and societal benefits worth more than that extra studying hour's academic benefits. And indeed, remember that the more time you spend studying while you're exhausted and bored, the less benefits you get, so the higher the next best alternative's relative value becomes. So even if your body's more resistant to exhaustion, you have to ask if spending much more time studying is even the best choice. Now, of course, this isn't a call to ignore studying, but to make sure you're not investing excessive resources into anything. Now, related to opportunity costs, what alternatives are usually sacrificed when we decide to spend more time studying? Well, take the common high school or college triangle of sleep, grades, and social life, of which you can only pick 2. Now, throughout the IBDP, I accepted this, my personal choice being grades first and foremost, social life second, and I rejected sleep, which didn't go so well for me. So actually, thinking of it this way might be unrealistic and even harmful, because consistently prioritizing 2 of these while consistently neglecting 1 is unsustainable, whether for mental or physical health or for future prospects, as I learned the hard way. And I'll explain why, though first note that diminishing returns applies to all 3 sides, albeit with different causes for each. Anyways, firstly, why shouldn't you constantly neglect sleep? Well, WebMD says lack of sleep impairs your brain functions and basically ruins your physical and mental health, which I agree with. Personally, throughout the IBDP, my sleep schedule was horrible. Going to bed at 4 to 5 a.m. was considered the norm, doing so before 3 was considered good, before 2 was a luxury, and before 1 was unthinkable. Now, I should emphasize I went to bed, not fell asleep, at those times, because due to my sleeping issues, falling asleep could take anywhere from 30 minutes to 4 hours, or of course, I could just not fall asleep at all. Now, these sleeping problems led to a vicious cycle where lack of sleep created stress and led to reduced performance, so more time was required to do work instead of studying, and falling behind deadlines caused more stress, making sleep even harder. And because of this and how relentless the workload was, I could hardly find time to catch up on lost sleep and to how behind I was on academics, especially since pursuing a 45 meant I couldn't afford to cut my efforts. And the consequences of this were long-reaching. It led to burnout, consistent exhaustion, and the fear of doing anything related to work or studying that I'm not sure I even really recovered from by the time I started university, and my sleep problems are still recurring. So, in short, please don't ignore your sleep or you'll suffer like me. Now, how about neglecting grades, or more appropriately, not studying? Well, disclaimer, grades aren't an infallible measure of your abilities. For example, sleep deprivation and pressure might cause you to underperform in exams, so your grades won't reflect your capabilities accurately. And furthermore, each person's strengths are unique and are too complex to be completely encapsulated by numbers coming from standardized assessments. However, knowledge and skills gained from studying can be crucial for your future, so neglecting it means you'll eventually have to catch up during a less convenient time. Now, personally, my problem during the IBDP was actually the opposite of neglecting grades, namely working and studying excessively and mindlessly. I once submitted a lab report so long that the science teacher started imposing page limits afterward. And I did this without seriously considering if the benefits were worth it. So hopefully you can avoid doing the same. And finally, how about constantly neglecting social life? Well, there's a whole TEDx talk by Professor Lieberman about how social interaction trains our brain and improves memory formation and recall. Meanwhile, studies cited by the American Psychological Association show that lack of social interaction raises stress, impairs cognitive processes, and harms the body. So even if you prioritize grades above all, spending time on social interaction is still in your best interests. Now, personally, I made sure to socialize with friends regularly using online platforms like Discord during the pandemic. Joking about our shared pains made the workload much more bearable, and it's especially comforting to hop into a call at like 3 a.m. with your friends when you realize you're all doomed for the same upcoming assignment. And really, without my friends' support, I likely wouldn't have been able to persevere all the way. However, I am ashamed to say that I didn't spend as much time with my family because I was unhealthily compelled by my obsession with the 45 to always be at a place where I could work and study, namely in front of my computer in my room. And in fact, I'm not sure if I would have been so socially active if the pandemic hadn't forced most socializing to take place online. Now, hopefully you won't do that because it was basically like squeezing the life out of life. So anyways, overall, the main point here is that excessively neglecting any sides is harmful. So consistently prioritizing two at the cost of one is not a good idea, let alone prioritizing only one, like studying, at the cost of the rest. And moreover, this triangle's an oversimplification. There's other things people have to dedicate their time to, like exercising, breaks, chores, and extracurriculars. And about breaks, though they may seem the most unproductive of these priorities, they are crucial in recharging you so you can work efficiently again afterwards. Now, if taking breaks still bugs you for some reason despite knowing that, you can try to do as I did and pretend you're still studying while taking a break. For example, I played Final Fantasy XIV, a game often praised for having great writing, and told myself I was studying literature. So anyways, this does turn the triangle into a polygon with so many sides, it seems impossible to balance your time across them. So what should you do? Well, one solution is to rotate your priorities in a way that ensures you aren't consistently neglecting any of them, keeping diminishing returns and shifting opportunity costs in mind. So maybe sometimes you want to spread your time. Other times you might want to concentrate on a few aspects for a while before focusing on a few other aspects and so on, depending on circumstances and recent progress. So say you're ahead of your schedule. You can tone down the studying and allocate more time to social life, exercises, and etc. Although, of course, not all things can be toned down equally, especially sleep, since it affects your performance and everything else. Now, building on what I've just discussed, let's evaluate whether a 45 is worth pursuing. I've already discussed the sacrifices entailed, but what did I gain in return? Well, pursuing a 45 forced me to really improve valuable transferable skills, like academic writing, research, analysis, and editing. And these have definitely helped me in university, and I'll likely continue relying on them in the future. I also gained a lot of knowledge from the studying required, although currently my retention of it isn't good because I didn't use proper studying methods, and I experienced long-term exhaustion, burnout, and fear of reviewing after finishing the IBDP. And then in terms of personal identity, which can be a plus, it might have impacted how others see me. Antarians now know me as the one who gives out IA exemplars and who teachers tell students to ask for IB help, which is good because it's nice to be able to help others. Nevertheless, I'm trying to ensure it hasn't changed any other aspect of my identity because I've realized I don't want to let myself be defined by and fixated on my former accomplishments. So in light of this, would I recommend pursuing a 45? Well, ultimately, it depends on your reasons. If it's for your self-confidence, then definitely no. Because I used to link self-confidence overwhelmingly to my grades, and that was extremely unsustainable. You can't avoid ups and downs due to unpredictable circumstances, and getting even a single bad grade with this mindset could ruin your self-confidence and demotivate you, which has happened to me more than once, usually with maths, where I was at some point a collector of 3s and 4s. Instead, remember you're more than your grades, which might even reflect your capabilities accurately. And then for uni admissions, well, also no, because a 45 is definitely not required to get into a good uni. It depends more on your personal statements and admissions exams and interviews if applicable. In fact, I applied with a predicted 45 and got rejected from Oxford and UCL, so definitely not a deal breaker. So it's better to focus on exam and interview preparation if required, and on extracurriculars you're passionate about, since they'll foster valuable soft skills that'll help you stand out more. Now personally, I invested so much time and effort in pursuing a 45 that I kind of neglected my extracurriculars outside CAS responsibilities, hence the rejection. For careers, well, I don't have personal experience yet, but one interview of 45 achievers suggests that employers care much more about positive references, university GPA, soft skills, interview responses, and personal projects, and so on. So maybe no. And for scholarships, well, if your university offers merit-based scholarships, then maybe yes, though whether the scholarship is worth the sacrifices depends on your circumstances. Finally, what if you genuinely enjoy the IBDP and think prioritizing it will be most beneficial versus the alternatives, and you view 45 not as something you must achieve, but as something you'd want to try achieve in a aim for the moon because if you missed, you might hit a starway? Then yes, because as mentioned, the process can help a lot, but always remember to reflect rationally. If you think you're sacrificing more time and effort than reasonable, and there are better uses for them, then perhaps it's best to scale down how much you're investing in pursuit of a 45. So, to conclude, pursuing a 45 demands sacrificing immense amounts of time and effort to an extent that might be inefficient from an economics perspective. Moreover, consistently sacrificing other important parts of your lives for anything, including studying, can be downright harmful. Hence, though the process does bring benefits, I'd only recommend pursuing a 45 if your uni offers merit-based scholarships or you genuinely enjoy the IBDP and think prioritizing it will help you most. Overall, I guess the key takeaway I want to emphasize is be reasonable and constantly reflect in weighing what to invest your time and effort into, what would benefit you and others most, and what are you sacrificing in choosing one activity over another. And in doing so, always consider all types of possible benefits. And remember not to spend too much time on anything because of diminishing returns. If you start getting tired or bored of something and you feel you're not getting much benefit from it, then it's time to do something else. Thank you.